So we are here talking about Spinnaker and Platform SIG. So let's get to it. Who am I? I am Cameron Motevasselani. I'm a software engineer over here at Armory, and I lead our Extensibility. I've been a Spinnaker contributor for the last 2 years at this point. And during that time, I've worked on a few different projects, the plugin framework, as well as the release process, both of which we'll be talking about today. Because of that, I've been co-leading the Spinnaker Platform SIG, which again, we're here to talk about today. Here's my contact info, Cameron at Armory.io. I'm also on GitHub, of course, as well as open source Slack. Please feel free to drop questions in whenever you guys have questions. The audio is not great. That is unfortunate. I'm not entirely sure what to do there. Share my screen as well. It is good if I'm close to the mic. Okay, I'll move my laptop a little bit closer. I don't have a professional mic set up. Is this a little bit better? We will continue on. Please let me know, though, if the audio quality can be improved. I'm not entirely sure what I can do there. But let's continue on. Sweet. So this last year, my voice is very bad. Awesome. Great. Well, let's see. I don't know what to do about that. We did do a green room a little bit earlier, and everything's working out fine. Okay. Well, it's understandable. Let's continue on. So in 2020 and 2021, we have been working quite a bit on Platform SIG, doing a few different initiatives. So let's go over some of those initiatives again. So the main initiative that we've been working on for the last year and a half has been Spinnaker Extensibility. So in this last year, at the very end of 2020, we started adding in the plugin v2 framework. So there's quite a bit of improvements that have come with this v2 framework, and we'll go over them a little bit more in detail later. But essentially what we've done is we've added a simpler way of configuring your plugin. And it's pretty easy to upgrade your plugin from v1 to v2 if you're a plugin developer. We've added a bunch of bug fixes as well. There were some issues with the v1 plugin framework that was causing a lot of issues with Orca in particular. Don't want to get into too many technical details, but we've improved the way we handle Spring in plugins quite a bit, so that you're able to do quite a bit more in a Spring way. Which, if you're developing against Spinnaker, it's a very Spring-based project, so we added some nice quality of life stuff around plugin development. We've also added a open source plugin repository, and right now every I think it was 224 and on. I think we have 124. Release 124 on has had the default plugin repository set to the open source plugin repository. So we have a few different plugins there now. So let's go over a couple of the plugins that have been released. There's this Armory Observability plugin. Let's see. So one thing that's been going on in the last year as well as the monitoring daemon code has been basically deprecated. Not many people are using the monitoring daemon code anymore, and it's not being developed or sustained. So a lot of people's dashboards broke in the past, and Armory had created this observability plugin to help with monitoring metrics this was a really good win from the plugin framework. Essentially, the community decided that monitoring should not be part of the platform itself. And because we have the plugin framework, we were able to split that functionality out from the Spinnaker code base itself. Of course, monitoring is something that everyone wants to have when they're running a CI CD platform, but without the observability plugin, it's a little bit challenging to do so, depending on your setup. So that's been one plugin that's been widely adopted by the community. There's also a couple plugins that have been added to the open source Spinnaker repository, including the AWS account registration plugin, which allows you to dynamically add accounts to Cloudflare. This is a huge benefit because you don't have to restart Cloudflare in order to add another account to the plugin. Accounts are added or removed without restarting the Cloudflare service. Cloudflare does a lot of interaction with the cloud, so not having to restart Cloudflare is a huge benefit. And finally, the AWS Lambda deployment plugin as well. This is also in the Spinnaker plugins repository. So this is, again, another open source plugin from the AWS. And this allows you to deploy Lambda functions in Spinnaker. So it's been really encouraging to see people developing plugins using the plugin framework, and to continue to see more of that in this next year. The other major initiative we've been working on this year, I'm a little closer to the mic, has been working on the release process. So there's been a lot of discussion about the release process in the last year. There's been a lot of wants and needs that we've been trying to improve the release process. There have been a few different initiatives where we've tried to consolidate either on a monorepo, and that had some challenges. We wanted to rip Jenkins out, that also had some challenges, so on and so forth. But we kind of have a forcing function this year with the end of life of Bintray. So Bintray is going end of life on July 4th. So we have to move off of Bintray. So that was a surprising piece of news for us. So that was kind of a forcing function to get us to update the current release process. So Bintray is going to end of life. We're migrating those artifacts to Nexus now. So there's GitHub Actions that will publish open source jars to Nexus, and they are now under the io.spinnaker group. So we renamed the group ID from tom.netflix.spinnaker to io.spinnaker. And again, we have a GitHub Action to publish jars. This work is currently in progress. So what we're doing right now is we're trying to keep as much of the current release process in place as much as possible. However, there's going to be certain things that will change. If you are a consumer of Spinnaker, where you consume bombs and use halyard in order to install and deploy Spinnaker, everything should continue to be working as expected. We're going to continue to publish bombs and release notes and all that fun stuff. That being said, if you develop on top of Spinnaker, that is to say, you consume these jars and then develop on top of them, you can need to update some of your extension projects, like where you pull your jars from and what the group items are there. Again, we are currently in process of doing this, and right now, the one of the main not blockers, but things we're trying to collect feedback on is Debian packages. So if anyone uses Debian packages, please let myself know, or post in the Platform SIG channel in open source Slack. We are looking for users of the Debian packages and the use cases around those. Cool. So these are the main two initiatives that we're working on with the Platform SIG in this past year, and we're still working on them. The plugin framework has been pretty stable for a while now, so we're not seeing too much development on the framework itself. That being said, we're seeing quite a bit of movement in the plugin development space. So a lot of people are creating plugins. The release process, as I said, is currently a work in progress. So it's an effort by both Armory and Salesforce to update the release process. So we talked a little bit about plugins. Let's go. Let's talk about a little bit about plugin history, and then we'll have questions at the end. So before plugins were around, sharing best practices with the community was challenging. So Spinnaker has a lot of features. However, there's some things that are missing. One of the great things about Spinnaker is having best practices codified within stages. So we were thinking when we started the plugin framework RFC request for comments, we kind of took a look at the state of Spinnaker and saw, hey, there's a lot of opportunity to share best practices with the community in ways that are not already built into Spinnaker. We've had this mental model, let's say, or desire to have Spinnaker be a wheel core and have an expansive ecosystem of features that you can add on your Spinnaker. So those were a few different drivers for creating the plugin framework. So by sharing plugins across the community, we're able to have some standardization around stuff like I think one of the first targets that we wanted to turn into a plugin was the gremlin stage, for instance. Not everyone does chaos engineering, so it doesn't necessarily make sense for the gremlin stage to be part of this Spinnaker installation. However, it does make sense for it to be a plugin. In addition to that, versioning of plugins or versioning of the best practices was not around, so we added that as well. Discoverability too. We have these, like I mentioned earlier, we have an open source plugin repository that helps a lot with discovering these new best practices in ways that we did not have before. And kind of a side effect, but another really good feature of having a plugin framework, again, one that did not exist before plugins came around, was the speed at which you can deliver new features to users. Spinnaker has a release cadence of every 8 weeks. Just have a new minor release. Apologies, that has not been happening lately as we've been iterating quite quickly on the release process. But if you are on an older version of Spinnaker and want to have a new feature, sometimes there's blockers to upgrading. Either your security team needs to evaluate a new installation of Spinnaker, look at all the packages, make sure there's no vulnerabilities there, etc., etc. So with lots of different blockers that could potentially make it hard to upgrade your Spinnaker installation. But you want to get new features. Plugins are a great way of giving you features without having to upgrade or allowing you to upgrade on your own time. It lowers the barrier of entry for adopting Spinnaker as well. Spinnaker has a lot of features, but every user environment I've seen has some uniqueness to it. So either internal services and systems that companies have developed for their own purposes, or just a new a tool that Spinnaker doesn't have a current integration with. So by adding a plugin framework, we're able to help tackle that issue of the barrier of entry to adopting Spinnaker. If you can have a plugin that can deploy or get off or RBAC information from your in-house custom in-house services, it will help you adopt Spinnaker in the first place. And then finally, reduce maintenance costs. The cost of having random bits of code in the code base that are not maintained is great. So again, that goes to the clean core and expansive ecosystem idea we've been promoting. All right. So after we create the plugins, let's talk about kind of the different versions of the plugin framework that. So originally we did a plugins MVP, a very, very minimum viable product. We just wanted to prove out that plugins were something that, one, we could do technically, and two, is something that users actually wanted. So we made an RFC to propose adding a plugin framework to Spinnaker. We wanted to just test out to see if it'll work. So it was an extremely simple system where we would just add jars to the class path and to the Spring class loader, and then promote those to the Spring application. In that way, we were able to add new functionality to Spinnaker instance. Again, we targeted Workday at first, so we targeted adding custom stages, as that's the main way that users interact with Spinnaker. Hopefully, pipelines and stages a very simple concept for users. We got a lot of interest in this, and that was awesome. It was also a little challenging because adding jars to the class path is not necessarily the most, not the preferred way to operate systems. There's a lack of metrics, lack of monitoring. If your libraries were out of sync with the underlying Spinnaker service, it would cause issues. So we quickly realized there's a lot of interest. We need to level up plugins framework. Because of the interest and everything, we created the Platform SIG, and that's what we're talking about here today. So again, talking about what was wrong with the MVP, there was a lack of metrics, and the quality of life for both Spinnaker operators as well as plugin developers was not awesome. There was a lot of work you would have to do to keep your plugin in line with the Spinnaker code base, and Spinnaker operators had a really tough time understanding. I have plugin version 1 and I have Spinnaker version 122. Which plugin version works with my Spinnaker version? So there was a lot of issues with the MVP that we kind of knew about in advance, but we just wanted to get engaged interest on it. Because of that, we created the plugins V1 RFC, and we introduced a framework called PF for J. I've talked about these a few times in the past, so please check out my slides afterwards. I'll post them in the chat with the slides, but yeah, check it out. It's a pretty cool framework, adding a plugin framework for Java agent services. We did a little bit of additional work on top of the PF4J framework to enable plugins to be a bit more Spring friendly, so that you can write your plugins in a little bit more Spring friendly way with annotations, etc., so that you can hook into Spinnaker services in a easier way. Again, that's for quality of life improvements for plugin developers. We created a plugins working group that met quite often. We started out like on a weekly basis and just met as needed. This was really good for quick iteration on the plugin framework. as a high-level goal for the V1 framework, we want to say, as a plugin developer, I can write a plugin and share that with the. So after a while, we got some good feedback on the V1 framework for plugins. There were some bugs, like I mentioned earlier. We could write a custom stage, and it was version 123 of Spinnaker. What was happening was if you had a custom stage and you restarted your Orca instance, it changed the load order of plugins and how things were initialized. So it was not a good time, and our Orcas totally failed after that. So they were not processing messages in the queue, and yeah, again, it was a bad time. So we discovered a few underlying issues with the V1 framework. In addition, it was not actually springy enough. There were still quite a bit of quality of life improvements we could add and did add with the V2 framework for Spring developers. We simplified configuration as well, which, while it's a minor thing, it does help a lot with understanding how exactly how plugins are configured. Rather, we reduced the amount of knowledge Spinnaker operators need in order to configure the plugins. In the V1 framework, we leaked some information about the underlying classes and configurations. Spinnaker operators would have to know, oh, these configurations went with this underlying class, and that was challenging. So we have it all under a config section. We also fixed some bugs, of course. So that's basically it for today. If you're interested in helping out or learning more about the work we're doing at the Platform SIG or for plugins, please join us in the plugins channel or the Platform SIG channel as well. We meet every other Thursday for the Platform SIG at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And that is it. Does anyone have questions? Oh, thanks, David. I'm going to update that real quick. Channel. Well, if there are no questions, I'll stick around a little bit here in this room. Please post any questions in chat, and I'm going to post my slides in chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, can you please elaborate over the observability plugin? Any questions in particular about the observability plugin? It's available to use with something like that. I believe this works with the dashboards that previously worked with the monitoring daemon. I'm not super confident on that, though. I'm just not involved in the development of this. Let's see. So please post in the Armory channel in open source for questions about the observability plugin. I don't entirely know if there's a particular dashboard for it. I believe we have one, but here we go. The open source community maintains Spinnaker Mixin as a collection of Grafana dashboards with metrics exposed by the observability plugin. I guess something else of note, and that happened, I guess it's been here. We also had we participated in Google Summer of Code as mentors last year for the Spinnaker project. So I was a mentor last year, and we had a mentee, Victor, who had created a plugin for interacting with Chrome CI. So it was a pretty cool plugin. I don't know if I can pull it up real quick. I can try to find that and link it in chat as well. But it was really encouraging to see students from across the world um, helping out with Spinnaker development and creating plugins for Spinnaker. The Drone CI plugin is one of the more, I would say, more advanced plugins as it touches a few different microservices and allows triggers from Drone CI. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I will share slides out to everyone. All right, please let me know if you can't access those slides. Um, Otherwise, I'll be here for 2 minutes longer to answer questions. I'm going to add a link here at the bottom for the Platform SIG information as well. Again, every other Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. We've got a agenda up there and some contact information. All right, so that is everything. Thanks very much for joining today. I hope you all have a good day. Again, please let me know if you have any questions.